Okay, well, I've waited, as I often say, the obligatory 15 seconds to see who might show up. Good morning, everyone. As you come in, I'm having morning coffee. I'm going to meet someone for breakfast here and discuss some doctrinal stuff, some scriptural stuff, some business, other things. Good morning, everyone, as you come in. And of course, I'm Roy Potter, and this is a live stream version of the Potter Expositor. So, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. There's quite a bit of background noise. There's some construction going on here, so I hope you can hear me all right. I've kind of turned the phone so that maybe it'll be a little better. This won't be a long broadcast, of course. I always say that, but I had a friend yesterday who texted me. And of course, I knew this information when I did my research back for my book, The Crimson Thread, which is about the Zealot movement, the Zachari movement, the Messianic movement in Judea back in the first century, which is where Christianity really came from. If you haven't gotten my book, I don't mean this to be a marketing thing or promotion for it, but it really explains a lot of this in a novel form. I'm not a novelist, I'm an historian, so it's not a page burner, but it will give you some information that happened prior to what we're going to talk about today, just for a few minutes. The Sicarii Zealot Messianic movement was in response to the Roman occupation of Judea and Palestine, and also, of course, to stand against their puppet rulers, who were the Herodians, who were actually Edomite Arabs. And I've talked about this before. And I won't get into a whole lot of detail of those events in the early part of the century. I want to jump ahead. First of all, I want to talk about, you see what's in the title here, about a Parousia. A lot of people say, well, what's that? Well, this friend of mine called up yesterday. Actually, he texted me. He says, did you know that there is no archaeological evidence to support a mass suicide by the Jews who were occupying Masada during the Roman siege there in 73 AD? And I said, yes, I did know that, because there was no mass suicide. And he went, what? And I said, yeah, there was no mass suicide. That is an incorrect interpretation of the events. Actually, it's almost supernatural. So that's what I'm going to talk about real quick this morning. Remember, Jesus said that there were members of that generation who would not die, who would see the coming of the coming of the Son of Man in glory. And there's been a lot of, you got to understand that the Romans dealt with the New Testament in ways you probably don't want to admit. But that was one that they kind of laughed at, so they kind of let it stay there. Well, if it hadn't happened for real, then it would have proved Jesus a liar. It did happen. And it's called the Parousia. Now, a lot of times the Parousia, they don't know, most scholars, most people don't know where it would happen. The Parousia means that it's a coming, okay? It's a coming. Possibly not the second coming that everybody looks for, but it's a coming is what it means. And so what happened is that the Romans very much used false flags the way governments do today. They accused the Jewish zealots, the Jewish messianists, the Jewish Sicarii of attacking their own people, kind of like terrorism, and killing them. And then the Romans would use that as an excuse to tighten down on their military operations, saying they're trying to protect the people, when in reality they were the ones dressed up as Jews who came in and killed people wholesale in some of these villages. That happened even during Jesus' lifetime. Now, go ahead and start the Jewish War in 70 AD, the Roman Jewish War, okay, when the Jews were trying to finally force Rome out in major operations. It didn't work very well because of all of this infiltration. Military intelligence operations were going on by the Romans and by the Herodian rulers, the puppets of the Romans, all through the Jewish communities, much like you see InfraGard today, the FBI, uh, those types of people. The institution is more important than the liberty of the individual and true freedom. So this was going on then. Well, what happened was is that these Jewish Sicarii, they were in fact, if you remember Judas Iscariot, well, what that means is Judas the Sicarii, a member of the Sicarii, is really what that means. A lot of people have wondered what that name is. Well, that's what it is. So he was a member of this group that really, people don't want to admit this, but that Jesus was part of. The Sicarii, the Messianic movement, the Zealots, the people at Qumran, for instance, even the one that you know as the Apostle James. Well, so what happened was is these people fled to Masada that had been built by the Hasmonean Maccabees prior to the beginning of the first century as a fortress, and they occupied it and were living there. Well, the Romans knew that they had to attack them. So what they did was, to justify it in the locals' minds, again, they pulled a false flag on a small village called Ein Gedi, and they killed 700 Jewish people in that village. The Romans did. Not the Sicarii, not the Messianists, not the Zealots. That's not who did that. They had no purpose. They had no reason to do that. So this was a Roman black ops operation, a false flag, to justify this in the minds of the locals so that they could attack the people at Masada. Well, Masada was a crazy good fortress, okay? And the Romans had to build a ramp. This siege lasted about, I think it was about 3 to 6 months, something like that. Okay, now put yourself in the position. This lady's going to give me some coffee. I'm doing a broadcast. Thank you so much. They take good care of me here. So put yourself in the role of the Roman commander. Silvus, I think was his name, over the 10th Legion, and you spend all this time and energy attacking this fortress. The emperor wants this done, right? Okay, so at this point in time, I think it was Vespasian. Titus was in the running, but I think it was Vespasian who was the emperor at this time. So, they want results, right? So the Romans take all of this time to attack Masada, and when they finally breach the walls, there's nobody there. Now, if you had been the Roman commander and you spent all this time and energy attacking a fortress, and you don't have any bodies, anything to show for it, what do? There is no way that those people had a secret exit from Masada. It was under siege. There were no secret places out. All those had been discovered long before, when the Edomites had that area, the Herodians, the rulers. There was no secret way out for all those men, women, and children. And these were family members, relatives, and friends of Jesus and his family. So a major messianic figure's allies were on Masada. So the Romans get up there and there's nobody there. What do you say? Well, you can't tell the emperor that, they're gone. So you say, well, we scared them so bad they committed suicide, all of them. And they ended up taking, I think it was like a half a dozen prisoners who remained. I think they were women and children. But that may not even be true. But modern archaeological evidence shows that there was no evidence of a mass suicide at Masada. Now the Jews want to claim it, today's Jews want to, because it's another one of those things that, first of all, they can't explain it any other way, and secondly, they make a big deal about it. I'm not saying that to put down the Jews. It's just that the IDF, the Jewish army, takes oaths at Masada and says that kind of thing will never happen again. Well, I'm here to tell you it didn't happen in the first place, because what Jesus said is that there were those living in that generation that would not see death but would see the coming of the Son of Man. And that's what the Parousia was, the first The first resurrection was when Jesus was resurrected. The changing in a twinkling of an eye happened at Masada, the Parousia, the coming to save his family from certain death by the hands of the Romans. I thought I'd just tell you about that this morning because there are miracles that have happened. There are scripturally, not historically, but scripturally to say that other peoples have been, entire communities, towns, cities even, have been taken out of the material world. I don't want to say the physical world, but out of the material world. In other words, these people remain people. They don't become androgynous beings or disembodied spirits. They become transformed because the binding of matter, of the physical with the spiritual, is what this is about. This entire life is about that. The next part of creation is that binding, which most people don't want to talk about. They want to say the body's bad and all that, and you've heard me talk about that before. But in fact, that's what it's about, or else what's the point, right? So a lot of people are going to have a little trouble with this, but there is no other explanation. There certainly is no historical explanation for what happened. So it only leaves one answer, and I'm going with the fact that this was the Parousia at Masada that was foretold by Jesus himself when the great destruction would occur, and that he returned and rescued members of his family and his friends and the Messianic movement and hid them away. And they're living somewhere today, I would imagine. Probably part of the angels that'll come back with him when he comes back big time. Yes, I believe that's the case. And thank you. Brand Thornton was the one who actually asked me this question. I'm going to give a shout out to Brand because, he's always willing to look at the stuff that most people would say is crazy. Okay, but it's because maybe we've done a lot of crazy things in our lives and we're willing to take the risk. Okay, so thanks, Brand, for asking me the question. I haven't wanted to bring this up in the past because it sounds crazy to most people and they want to laugh at you and all that, but really there is no other answer except maybe a secret passageway where 700 people managed to escape through without being detected by the Romans, and I doubt that very, very seriously. Of course, what's Occam's razor? That's what Occam's razor would say, is, oh, they just found a way out. Well, I'm going with the spiritual answer, that this was in fact a fulfillment of one of Jesus's prophecies. And it's a physical, historical proof of what he was and what he is. And just as much as I look at the Shroud of Turin as a genuine, honest, not just relic, but proof of his bodily resurrection as a man, not an androgynous being, but as a man, and that women will be resurrected as women, as long as you don't do anything too terribly bad. Leave that with you this morning. I hope you have a great day. So the Parousia did happen at Masada in 73 CE or AD, as you would know it. Going on record to declare that, okay? Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day. We'll see you.